This is a picture from one of my trip to London a few years back. Isn't that a majestic structure? Known as the London Eye, it has been a popular tourist attraction. No, I'm not here to talk about that great Ferris wheel. Instead, I want to talk about the great wheel of user stories. If you're doing Agile, I'm sure you have asked this question to yourself and everyone around you. I am pretty sure you have heard different ideas and opinions, read various articles, and probably watched various videos explaining the user stories. Today, I want to look at the user story from different angles, various different angles. I guarantee this would be worth your time. So, let's get started. As the name suggests, user stories are user-centric. You must have user and their specific needs and wants in mind when you're writing your user stories. User stories are units of value. I repeat, user stories are units of value. They are not units of work, but unit of value. With each user story, you are identifying what brings value to your customer, and then work towards creating and delivering that value to your customer. Remember these 2 points, customer and value. For any project or initiative, knowing the customer is a great first step. And then knowing what brings value to your customer is a step in the right direction. In fact, I would say ask this question all the time. What brings the most value to my customer? A user story is just a placeholder for some functionality that we may work on at some point in time. When you write a user story, you are not making a promise that you will work on it. Instead, it's a promise to have that conversation later on. As we said, it is a promise to have a conversation later on. And if prioritized by our product owner, the team would take it into their iteration, into their sprint, work on building and delivering the functionality. User stories are not requirements document. I repeat, user stories are not requirements document. We capture just enough information in the user story. The details will emerge later on. What is just enough? What is good enough for now? This is up to the team. Let the team decide what is good enough for now. This could be just one line statement is good enough for now. Initially, when we write the user story, one line statement might be good enough for the team. These 3 C's refer to cards, conversation, and confirmation. So cards is referring to the index cards that were used earlier to write the user stories. It has limited real estate, so it forces you to be more precise when you write the story, more concise. Right? Second is the conversation. The conversation referring to the conversation that we will be having with the product owner, the stakeholders, the customers. It's referring to the conversation between product owner and the team. Conversations within the team across different members of the team. The point is, the conversation is very critical and important in Agile. The last C refers to the confirmation, that is referring to the acceptance criteria. How do we confirm that we have delivered the functionality that was asked for? 3 Ds is defer detailed discussion. Again, when we write the user stories, even a single line statement might be good enough at that point in time. We are essentially punting the detailed discussion for later, and we are doing that intentionally. When is that later on? That is whenever the product owner prioritizes your user story and brings it to the backlog refinement. So this 3Ds again is differing detailed discussions. It is recommended, not required, that you write the description using as a user format. Essentially what this format does is it forces you to identify three critical aspects of a user story, and that being who, what, and why. Who is this story for? What are we doing? And why are we doing it? Now, the user stories would have some estimates. Not all the user stories would be estimated, but as the product owner prioritizes your user story and brings it to the backlog refinement, the team is going to have a discussion with the product owner. In order to get the story ready, they would also be looking at the estimates. Now, these estimates are provided by the team, and the team may use the story points or the t-shirt size as the units of this estimate. Remember, these estimates are provided by the team and they are relative effort estimates. Again, as I said, these estimates should come from the team. So the team collectively discusses and comes up with these estimates. What we are looking for here is the wisdom of crowd. We want everybody in the team to be participating in this discussion at the refinement, and everybody is bringing their opinion, everybody is bringing their experience and knowledge to the table during this estimation. That allows us to have a better estimate. Again, remember, wisdom of crowd. Let me pause you here and ask you two important questions. Is your team carrying user stories to next sprint and then sprint after that? That's the first question. What I mean by that is your team is committing a story to your sprint, then works on it, doesn't get completely done. So the team decides, okay, let's move it to the next sprint. Works on it and then maybe completes it, or maybe it's not completed yet, moves it on to the third sprint, and so on and so forth. And this is a practice that is repeated for pretty much every stories, or it is happening regularly. So the question is that what is happening in your team? Is this one of your team? The second question I want to ask you is your team splitting the user story at the end of the sprint? Now here again, the team has committed a story to the sprint. They work on it, they did some of the work, but the story is not completed fully. So at the end of the sprint, when they are closing the sprint, they decide, hey, let's split this into two stories. One story would be the work that they have completed, and the other story would be the remaining work. They will write these two stories. They will split the story into two stories and then take the partial credit for the work they completed. And the work that is not completed, that story would move into the next sprint. So that's the second question. Is your team splitting the user story at the end of the sprint? If you answered yes to any of these questions, your team is practicing anti-pattern. These are the bad behaviors that you want to stay away from. When we talk about the user stories, there is no such thing as a partially done story. Either you finish the story completely or you haven't completed the story. There is no in between. If your team commits a story to the sprint, the expectation is that the team is going to finish that story completely within that one sprint. We cannot and should not take credit for partial work on the story. So it makes sense to keep the user stories small enough so that the team can complete it in the sprint. Remember, you want to slice the story to small enough size that the team can complete it within the sprint. Small is good here. User stories should have the acceptance criteria, especially when the product owner has prioritized the story and we are getting ready to take that story into next sprint. We want to ensure that the story has the acceptance criteria. Without acceptance criteria, you don't know what is the end state of a user story. Without the acceptance criteria, your story, I would say, is open-ended story, which sets you up for failure. So you definitely don't want to take a story that is open-ended story. So you want to ensure that the user story has the acceptance criteria and you know the scope of the user story. You know the end state of the user story. So make sure that the user story has the acceptance criteria. Now user stories are describing what the functionality is needed. The user story in essence is telling the team what is being asked for. The user story does not and should not tell them how to build it. So the how to build it would come from the team. They will figure out how to build that functionality and deliver that functionality. So in user story, you want just enough details that the customer can accept the work done without telling the team as to how to build it. Remember, user stories are about what, not how. Now your acceptance criteria tell them the end state as we talked about it earlier. So your acceptance criteria must be SMART. The acceptance criteria should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. These acceptance criteria would be provided by the product owner, by the business. Right? They should be specific. Give specific details as to what needs to happen in order for the product owner to accept the story as done. We should be able to measure it and show the results. Right? Is this something that we can do? Is this something that is achievable? Is this something that is relevant? Is this something that's going to bring value to the user? And can we finish it in a timely fashion? Right? So the SMART acceptance criteria give you clear direction as to what is the end state for that user story. Man, that's a lot of different dimensions we looked at. Let's take a pause and let's recap what we have discussed so far. First and foremost, a user story should be customer-centric and focus on value. It's a placeholder. It's a promise to have a conversation later on. Later on, when my product owner prioritizes this user story. A user story is not a BRUF. User story is not a big requirement upfront. Instead, we focus on just enough and good enough for now. Each user story has 3 C's and 3 D's. Defer, detailed, discussion. Each user story should also answer who, what, and why. And a good product owner will invest in your user stories with SMART acceptance criteria. My team collectively as a group will discuss the user story and come up with the estimates. And many more dimensions yet to be discussed. Join me again in next video where we continue looking at this great wheel of user stories. And if you got some value from this video, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. See you in the next video as we continue to look at this great wheel of user stories.